I don't know the exact moment sleep left me, only that I woke to a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself was listening. The clock beside my bed glowed softly in the dark. 3:17 a.m. I remember staring at it, confused, my mind still stuck between dreaming and waking. The night felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A faint sound, soft and fragile, like a breath pressing against the darkness. At first I thought it was the wind slipping through the cracks of my window, but then it came again. A whisper. Thin, shivering through the silence, and it spoke my name. Not loudly, not forcefully, just a breath, a faint calling that brushed the edge of my ear. Hey, come here. I froze. My entire body locked as if something inside the room was holding me still. The whisper didn't come from the hallway, or the living room, or outside the window. It came from inside my bedroom, from somewhere close, too close. My room was dim, washed in the soft glow of the streetlights outside. I searched the shadows, the corner behind the door, the foot of the bed, the empty chair in the corner. That always looked like a person in the dark. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but the air. It felt colder. The whisper came again, this time clearer, this time unmistakable. Your name? It said my name, perfectly, as if whoever whispered it had practiced it for years. The sound slid down my spine like ice water. I forced myself to sit up, but the moment I moved, the whisper stopped, as if whatever spoke had seen me and gone still. I turned on my lamp. Light filled the room. Everything was exactly as it should be. Normal, silent, empty. But the air still felt wrong, like I had woken something, like something was now aware of me. I got up and checked the hallway, checked the bathroom, checked the kitchen. Every door was locked. Every window sealed. The house was cold but quiet. Still, no matter where I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, somewhere, was still whispering my name. I returned to my bedroom, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A dream. A trick of half-sleep. The house settling. But as I slipped back under the covers, I looked at the clock again. 3:17 a.m. The exact time I heard the whisper. Something deep in my chest tightened. And then, as I closed my eyes, I heard it again, softer than before, drifting from the corner of the room. I see you. Not loud. Not threatening. Just aware. And for the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of the dark. The next night, Micah couldn't sleep. The image of the pale figure standing in the field kept replaying behind his eyelids. Every time he closed them, he saw that long, twisted arm rising slowly as if beckoning him closer. By 2:17 a.m., his radio short-waved again. 3 sharp bursts of static followed by a low hum, like a voice trapped underwater. No broadcast tower near Ravenshade sent signals at that hour. Micah knew that. Still, something compelled him to answer. He slipped on his boots, grabbed his old flashlight, and stepped outside. The night was too quiet. Even the crickets were gone. A wind moved through the corn, but it wasn't natural. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing. As he approached the field, the radio vibrated in his hand. The soil beneath the stalks pulsed faintly, each beat syncing with the hum from the radio. The ground felt alive. Micah knelt and pressed his ear to the earth. There was a tapping. Not random. Not mechanical. A pattern. A message. Someone, or something, was knocking from beneath the ground. Then the corn parted on its own, opening a narrow path that stopped at the exact spot where he saw the figure the night before. His flashlight flickered. The radio hissed. And then a voice, thin and distorted, whispered through the static. Don't run. You called us first. Micah stumbled backward, because the voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the soil beneath his feet. The morning after Micah heard the whispering beneath the soil, Ravenshade felt different, wrong in a way he couldn't describe. The sky hung low with a grayness that looked bruised, as though the horizon itself had been struck by something massive. Even the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere was thick with dust or old breath. Micah hadn't slept since the encounter. Every time he lay down, he could still feel the vibration of the tapping beneath the earth. He could still hear that voice, dry, whispering, impossible. You called us first? What did that even mean? He walked into the kitchen, hoping the routine of coffee would calm him. But when he flicked the machine on, it sputtered and died instantly. No power. He checked the lights. Nothing. His phone was dead too, though he charged it the night before. The entire house was silent. Too silent. He stepped outside to check his breaker but stopped at the porch. The cornfield, usually golden and swaying, stood completely still. Not a single stalk moved even though a breeze brushed his face. The corn was breathing again, rising and falling in a slow pulse. Micah froze. It was subtle but unmistakable. The entire field inhaled and exhaled. He stumbled backward and his heel hit something on the porch. His old radio. He didn't remember bringing it outside. When he picked it up, the radio clicked itself on without his touch. A voice whispered through the static. "Ground is thin today, listen carefully." Micah threw the radio to the floor, but it kept whispering louder now as if eager. "They're waking. They know your name." He kicked it off the porch. It landed in the dirt with a dull thud, and suddenly the ground rippled beneath it, swallowing the radio as though the soil opened a mouth and pulled it down. Micah ran. He didn't care where, anywhere away from the farmhouse, away from whatever the field had become. He sprinted toward town along the old gravel road, but after a few minutes he slowed. Something was wrong. The air had stank. Like rot but older. Ancient. As if something that had been buried for centuries had been exhumed. Ahead on the roadside he saw a scarecrow. It wasn't unusual. Some farmers around Ravenshade still used them. But this one was different. It wasn't standing in a field. It was standing directly in the middle of the road as though waiting for him. Its face was covered with a burlap sack, but the sack was soaked around the mouth area, as if something behind it was drooling or bleeding. Its arms were longer than they should be, wrongly jointed and crooked. Micah took one step back. The scarecrow's head twitched. Just once. But enough to freeze his breath. He turned to run back the way he came, but the cornfield was now much closer than before. As if it had moved. As if the rows of stalks had shifted silently while he wasn't looking, drawing nearer like a crowd gathering around someone in the dark. Micah felt a trembling beneath his boots. A deep thud. Then another. Then another. Footsteps. But not on top of the soil. Under it. Moving fast. Approaching him. He ran, back toward his house now because staying in the open was worse. The footsteps grew louder beneath the ground, pacing him, following him like a predator tracking prey from below. By the time he reached his farmhouse, the porch boards were shaking. The earth around the house bulged upward like something was tunneling toward him. He grabbed the first thing he saw, an old lantern, and rushed inside. He slammed the door, locked it, then pushed a cabinet against it. His breath came in hard, ragged pulls. Silence. For a moment. Then, scratch, 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 scratch. Not at the door. Not at the walls. But beneath the floorboards. Micah backed into the kitchen as the scratching moved from room to room, slow and deliberate, like whatever was under the floor was choosing where to break through. Then everything stopped. Micah stood still for a full minute, muscles locked, trying not to breathe too loudly. He crept across the hallway, each step cautious. Halfway to his bedroom. Bang. Something hit the underside of the floor so hard the boards cracked. Dust rained down. Another impact split the wood. A pale hand, long fingers, too many joints, forced itself between the planks, grasping blindly at the air. Micah grabbed a chair and smashed it down on the hand. The creature, or whatever it was, retreated, screeching in a thin, metallic shriek that made Micah's ears ring and his vision blur. Then silence again. This time it lasted longer. Minutes passed. Micah gathered his courage and walked toward the broken floorboards. A single eye stared up at him through the crack. Pale yellow. Cold. Wrongly shaped. It blinked. Micah fell backward, scrambling away. The eye followed his movement behind the floorboards, tracking him like prey. Then a voice rose from beneath the boards, low, wet, whispering. "We were buried here first. And you dug us awake." Micah didn't understand. He hadn't dug anything. But the voice continued, now joined by others, hundreds of whispering, chattering tones mixing together like bones grinding in dirt. The harvest wakes. The soil remembers. Ravenshade was promised. Micah ran to his basement door, flung it open, and nearly vomited. The basement floor was breathing too. Not pulsing like the field. Breathing. Expanding and contracting. And in the center of the room, the dirt broke open like a gaping mouth. A pale arm crawled out, then another, then a head with no eyes, only deep hollow sockets filled with writhing black roots. Micah screamed and slammed the basement door shut. Something beneath shoved against it, but he piled furniture in front until the door stopped shaking. He collapsed in the hallway, shaking, sweat freezing on his skin. Then a knock came from behind him. Slow, soft, knuckle against wood. Knock, knock, knock. Micah turned. The front door. Someone, or something, stood on the other side. He stepped closer, trembling. From beneath the door, a black shadow spread across the floor, curling like smoke. The voice that spoke was unmistakable. The same one from the radio. Open the door, Micah. The ground has thinned. You can hear us now. Micah backed away. The doorknob began to twist on its own. Slowly, softly, deliberately. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer, but his hands were shaking too hard to hold it steady. The doorknob turned fully and then stopped. The voice outside whispered, "You called us first. Now we answer." Micah's breath hitched. He didn't understand. But then, slowly, memory pulled itself from the back of his mind. Something he'd forgotten. Something he buried years ago. Something he never expected to return. Something that did call them first. And the creatures beneath Ravenshade were waking for him. Because the soil didn't forget. Not the ritual. Not the promise. Not the sacrifice. Not him. The harvest was beginning. And Micah was the one who started it. The night after the second disappearance was colder than any night before it. The villagers spoke of a strange wind crawling through the forest, but I knew better. It wasn't wind. It was the house breathing. And it was breathing for me. I left the safety of my cabin with a lantern in my shaking hand, its warm glow fighting against the monstrous darkness wrapped around the old path. The trees leaned inward like twisted witnesses, their empty branches scratching at the air as if urging me to turn back. But there are moments in life when fear stops being a warning and becomes a doorway. This was one of them. As I walked, the forest grew unnaturally silent. No insects, no rustling leaves, no distant owl. Just my footsteps, and something else. Something pacing me hidden between the trunks. Every few minutes, my lantern flickered, not from the cold, but as though reacting to an unseen presence closing in. And each time it flickered, a faint whisper rose from the shadows. "Why did you come back?" I wanted to believe it was the wind. But the voice trembled with emotion, ancient, broken, longing. The path opened, and the house appeared once again in the clearing, untouched by time, yet wrong in every way a house could be. Its windows seeped a dim, pulsing glow, like something alive was moving behind them. The air around it hummed, low and steady like a heartbeat. I took a step toward the porch, but my lantern jerked violently in my hand. Its flame twisted into a thin spiral, stretching toward the house as though something inside was pulling it, feeding on it. Then, the lantern went out. Darkness swallowed me. For a moment I almost turned and ran. But before I could move, a faint ember relit inside the glass. Not yellow, not orange, but cold blue. And the lantern began to move itself, dragging my arm toward the left side of the house, toward a part of the property I had never dared explore. The ground behind the house sloped down into an old cellar entrance. Rotting wooden doors lay collapsed, half buried in dead leaves. From the darkness below, something breathed, slow, heavy, ancient. My lantern's blue flame pulsed in rhythm with it. I stepped toward the cellar, every instinct begging me to stop. The smell of damp soil and rusted metal rose from below, thick enough to choke me. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step taking me deeper into a space untouched by light for decades. At the bottom was a single room. A small, circular chamber lined with cracked stone. In the center stood a rusted iron table, and on its surface lay a dusty radio, far older than the house itself. The lantern flame shook violently. Then the radio turned on. Static filled the room, rising and falling like storm waves. A voice cut through it, distorted, layered, wrong. "You shouldn't have returned." My blood froze. Another voice joined it, softer, trembling, almost human. "Please, help us." The radio crackled again, and now dozens of voices bled through at once, crying, whispering, begging, screaming. Their agony shook the walls, dust raining down like falling ash. The lantern flickered violently, casting the shadows on the walls into twisted silhouettes. Silhouettes that moved out of sync with my motions. Shadows that reached toward me, stretching long fingers across the floor. The radio shifted again. A single voice pushed through the chaos, clearer than the rest. "A woman. It's not the house that's alive, it's what lives under it." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The shadows on the walls bent backward, forming a shape, something tall, thin, with limbs too long and a skull-like face hidden in darkness. Its head tilted, studying me with invisible eyes. The lantern flame extinguished. Darkness erupted from every corner of the cellar, swirling, rising, swallowing the stone walls, swallowing the radio, swallowing the steps behind me. And under it all, through the suffocating blackness, came a whisper so close it brushed my ear. "Now, you belong to the house too." I stumbled backward, gasping, clawing upward through the darkness as the presence pressed around me, cold hands brushing my neck, my shoulders, my face. The cellar twisted into something impossible, stretching, contracting, trapping me between its shifting walls. Then, a sudden blast of wind. A bone-deep howl of something ancient and furious, and I was thrown out of the cellar. I landed on the grass outside as the collapsed doors slammed shut with such force the ground trembled beneath me. The house stood silent and still, pretending once again to be nothing more than worn wood and faded windows. My lantern relit beside me, its flame back to normal as if nothing had happened. But as I reached for it, I saw a message scratched deep into the metal handle, letters jagged and fresh, carved by something that did not use hands. "Run before midnight." They say some warnings are meant to save you. Others are meant to mark you. And as I stared at the message carved into the lantern, "Run before midnight," I could feel which kind this one was. Not a warning. A countdown. The sky above the clearing had darkened unnaturally fast, swallowing the last traces of evening light. Clouds rolled in with a strange, whispering wind, curling low around the trees like living smoke. I stumbled backward, clutching the lantern, my breath trembling as the forest around me shifted, listening. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, to escape the clearing before whatever carved that warning came back to finish what it had started. But I didn't run. Fear can paralyze you, but curiosity, the wrong kind of curiosity, can chain your feet to the earth. I told myself I needed answers. I told myself I had already gone too far to turn back. I told myself a lie that felt like truth. If I leave now, I'll never understand what this house wants. And so I stayed. The path back home felt longer than before, as though the forest stretched itself around me. Leaves rustled with no wind. Branches groaned as though something massive was moving just out of sight. More than once I heard footsteps behind me, but each time I turned there was nothing. By the time I reached my cabin, night had fully fallen. The moon hung unnaturally low, huge and pale, illuminating the trees in a ghostly white glow. My cabin's windows shimmered with that light, making the interior seem hollow and strange. I stepped inside, locked the door, and placed the lantern on the table. Its flame dimmed, almost as if it were afraid. For hours I sat in silence, replaying the voices from the cellar, the shadows that moved on their own, the radio that spoke in a language of pain. Every sound outside, a crack, a scratch, a gust of wind, twisted my nerves tighter. Then it began. At first, a soft tapping on the window. Steady. Rhythmic. Like someone tapping a single fingernail against the glass. I froze. The tapping continued, louder now, the glass vibrating under each strike. I forced myself to approach the window. Slowly. There was nothing outside. But as soon as I turned away, the tapping moved to the opposite window. Faster now. Aggressive. I staggered back, my chest tightening. Something outside circled the cabin. I grabbed the lantern, and its flame sputtered violently, shrinking to a trembling point of light. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply frost bloomed across the table in front of me. Then I heard it. A voice. Not outside, inside. A whisper floating from somewhere behind me. "You were told to run." My blood iced over. I spun around, and the cabin lights flickered wildly, shadows twisting into unnatural shapes on the walls. The whisper came again, but closer this time. Right beside my ear. "Midnight is coming." A knock thundered against the front door. Not tapping. Not scratching. A knock. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I stepped back, gripping the lantern like a weapon even though I knew it couldn't help me. The knock came again, harder, cracking the wood. And then the voice spoke from the other side. A voice that was not human. A voice with depth and decay and cold woven into every syllable. "Open the door, or I open it for you." My knees nearly buckled. I backed away until my spine hit the far wall. The lantern flame shrank to a trembling blue glimmer, barely holding on. The door creaked. Would split. Something pressed against it from the outside, something strong enough to make the hinges scream. I raised the lantern instinctively, and suddenly, it went out. Completely. extinguished. Darkness consumed the cabin. Deep, suffocating, absolute darkness. The kind that feels thick, alive, crawling across your skin with cold fingers. And in the pitch black, a whisper slid across the room like a snake coiling around my throat. You ignored the warning. The door burst open. Freezing wind exploded into the room. And something stepped inside. I couldn't see it, but I felt its presence towering over me, bending the darkness around itself, breathing cold air across my face. The floorboards groaned under its weight. The voice rose again, low, ancient, impossibly close. Now, you will hear what the house has been trying to say. Something touched my shoulder, long, thin, and colder than death. And then, everything went silent. The kind of silence that means you're not alone, but something is watching you breathe, waiting for you to move, waiting for midnight. After the door had burst open and the shadows pressed close, I thought the terror had reached its peak. I was wrong. What followed that night was a revelation I wasn't prepared for, a truth buried so deep beneath Ravenshade that even the earth seemed afraid to remember it. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the normal kind, the kind that hums in empty rooms, but a thick, unnatural silence. It filled the cabin like liquid pressing against my ears. Every breath I took echoed in my skull. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't obey. Something heavy leaned against me, invisible, pressing me into the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the lantern. The flames sputtered but held. And through that wavering light, I saw movement, shadows curling along the walls in shapes that no human body could form. Then came a whisper, or maybe several voices overlapping, speaking in riddles I almost understood. You dig too deep. You wake what sleeps. You are chosen. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But the voices were insistent, coaxing me forward, drawing me toward the back of the cabin where the floorboards were still broken from the previous night. I stepped carefully, my lantern illuminating the splintered wood. Beneath it, the earth pulsed as if alive. I remembered the words carved into the lantern handle, "Run before midnight." But I was past running. Curiosity or madness drove me forward. The gap in the floorboards revealed a dark cavity, deeper than the basement itself, descending into blackness that seemed to breathe. The radio lay at the bottom, dead. Static had died, but the whispers continued, soft, almost imperceptible. I climbed down, each step creaking, echoing in the deep void. The air grew colder with every movement, smelling of wet soil, decay, and something ancient. My lantern's light barely touched the stone walls, but the darkness seemed to have volume, thick and almost tangible. At the bottom, I found a strange symbol etched into the floor, a circle of runes half buried in dirt and ash. My skin crawled as I traced it with my trembling fingers. It was old, older than the town itself, and it pulsed faintly like it had a heartbeat. A gust of wind blew through the cavity. My lantern flickered, revealing a figure in the shadows. It wasn't fully formed, more like a silhouette, twisted, elongated, with arms that reached too far and fingers that bent backward. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I felt its eyes pierce me, seeing everything. The whisper came again. The soil remembers. The promises are not broken. You are part of it now. I stumbled back. The ground beneath me shifted, not shaking, not trembling, but alive, like breathing. Something moved under the stone, pushing up slowly. I could feel its form rising toward me, pressing against the circle. I ran, tripping over roots and debris, my lantern swinging wildly. Behind me, the whispers turned into a chorus, chanting, screaming, crying. Each voice layered upon the other, telling me the same thing in different ways. The house wants what you sought. You called it forth. You belong to the soil now. When I finally broke through the floorboards into the basement, I expected safety. But the air was colder than ever, and the shadows had grown long, stretching unnaturally toward the stairwell. The lantern's flame flared, revealing marks on the walls, scratches, claw marks, symbols carved deep into the plaster, glowing faintly in the pale light. I realized then that whatever haunted Ravenshade wasn't limited to the house. It was tied to me. Wherever I went, it would follow. The ground beneath the town, the forests around it, even the very walls of my cabin, all were connected to something older, something that had slept for centuries, waiting for me. I felt my pulse quicken. The whispers became a hiss, directing me toward the cellar once again. Each step I took toward the stairs felt heavier, like the floor itself resisted me. When I reached the bottom, the circle of runes glowed brighter, and the shadows coalesced into a mass, a moving, writhing darkness that seemed to have a face, multiple faces, and none at all at once. And then the radio sprang to life. Static. Hisses. A low, gurgling voice speaking my name in fragments. You called us first? I knew in that moment that the mystery was no longer something I could solve. It was something that had chosen me, bound me, and awakened an ancient hunger beneath the soil, a hunger I couldn't outrun. And as the shadows crept closer, I realized, the deeper I dug for answers, the closer I came to becoming part of the thing I feared most. The whispers crescendoed, echoing through the cellar and up into the walls of the house. Every stone, every floorboard, every shadow carried the message. The soil remembers. And you are its witness, its prey, its promise. I stumbled back into the stairwell trying to escape, but the darkness followed, curling around my legs, climbing my arms, whispering, breathing, watching. I knew then that the house had shown me only a fragment of its power. The mystery was deeper, older, hungrier than I could imagine. And whatever awaited me, it was patient. It always was. The air in Ravenshade had grown heavy, almost sentient. Every step I took toward the heart of the house felt resisted, like the floor itself didn't want me moving forward. And yet, something compelled me, or maybe dared me, to confront the thing that had been whispering, breathing, and crawling beneath the soil for nights on end. I reached the cellar door. Its hinges groaned as if warning me. Beyond it lay the darkened pit where I had seen the writhing shadows, the runes glowing faintly, and where the radio had screamed my name. I knew the creature was waiting. And for the first time, I didn't just feel fear. I felt recognition. It knew me. I belonged to it. I opened the door. The darkness poured out like thick smoke. My lantern's flame fought against it, casting long, twitching shadows across the cracked walls. And then I saw it. A mass of shifting shapes, pale limbs bending unnaturally, faces forming in the darkness and disappearing in a blink. It didn't just occupy the cellar. It filled it. Was it? The whispers intensified, overlapping into a chorus of agony. You called us, you woke us, now see us. I stepped forward, trembling. The shadows responded, writhing toward me like liquid smoke, crawling up the walls, curling around my feet. Their voices penetrated my mind, speaking memories I had never shared, secrets I thought forgotten. The house remembers. The soil remembers. And you are part of it. A figure emerged from the black mass. Taller than any human, its limbs twisted, its head tilting at impossible angles. Its face was a void, yet its eyes, or what I imagined were eyes, stared directly into me. It raised one arm, long and skeletal, and I felt a coldness seep into my chest. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. My body was paralyzed. Only my mind raced. The figure spoke, or maybe the whisper spoke through it. We are the promise you awakened. You dug too deep, you called too loud, now you must see the truth. The shadows expanded, pressing against my chest, my shoulders, my face. I fell to the ground, gasping, my lantern skittering across the stone floor. The runes on the floor glowed brighter, feeding the darkness, guiding it, shaping it. Then, without warning, the floor split. From beneath it rose more figures, pale, faceless, writhing forms, their limbs bending in impossible ways, crawling toward me. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes hollow, their very presence radiating centuries of hunger. I scrambled backward. My hands hit the lantern. It flared once, briefly illuminating the room, and I saw dozens of faces embedded in the darkness. Eyes opening, closing, staring, vanishing. Hands reaching, grasping, clawing. And then the whispers coalesced into one voice. We were buried first, and you dug us awake. Now you will see what waits for those who wake the soil. Something brushed against my neck. I flinched. The figure moved closer, silent, deliberate, its weight pressing the air around me like water. I felt its breath, cold, damp, and filled with soil. I grabbed the lantern and swung it toward the mass. The flame flared violently, casting shadows that danced across the walls. For a moment, it paused. The darkness recoiled, screeching in a way that felt alive. But then it surged forward again, faster, stronger. The whispers rose into a howl, and I realized this confrontation was not about survival. It was about recognition. The entity wanted me to see it, to know it, to acknowledge the depth of the horror beneath Ravenshade. I collapsed to my knees, panting. The mass descended on me. Limbs, faces, shadows, pressing, moving, consuming. Yet somehow I was not yet taken. The figure hovered above me, its void-like face tilting, and I felt an understanding pierce my terror. This was not just a house. Not just a cellar. Not just shadows. It was time made flesh, the soil and history and darkness of Ravenshade manifest. And I had been marked by it. The whispers softened, circling my mind like smoke. We see you. We know you. You are part of the promise. And then, as suddenly as it had engulfed me, the darkness receded. The figures melted into the floor, into the walls, into the very air. The cellar was quiet. My lantern's flame steadied. Only the faint pulse of the runes remained, glowing softly beneath the floor. I crawled back to the stairs, every nerve raw, every muscle shaking. The air was thick with the smell of damp soil and decay. The confrontation had passed, for now. But I knew it had not ended. Whatever had awakened beneath Ravenshade would wait. Watch. And the next time it called, I would have no choice but to answer. Because I had seen it. I had faced it. And nothing could unsee the horror that waited in the dark. The house seemed alive, and every step I took toward freedom felt heavier than the last. The cellar's darkness clung to me like a second skin, whispering my name in voices that were not my own. Every heartbeat echoed through the walls, mingling with the ancient pulse beneath the floorboards. I had no plan. Only one thought: escape. I climbed the stairs, my lantern flickering in fear. Shadows reached for me, stretching along the walls, fingers curling like black smoke. I swore one tried to grab my ankle, cold and heavy. I kicked out blindly and ran, tripping over broken furniture, scraping my hands along the warped wood. The front door loomed ahead. My hands were shaking violently as I reached for the knob. It turned. Slowly. Almost unwillingly. A gust of icy air pushed back as if the house itself was trying to keep me inside. The whispers rose into a chorus, hundreds of voices screaming, chanting, warning, pleading, "Stay, stay, stay." I forced the door open. The night rushed in like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of wet soil and ancient decay. Outside, the moon hung low and heavy, illuminating the overgrown path. Every tree looked like a looming figure. Every shadow was a hand waiting to drag me back. I ran. Branches clawed at my face. Roots tangled my feet. The whispers followed, echoing in the wind. The cornfield that once seemed distant had grown impossibly close, a living wall of stalks that twisted and bent toward me. I dodged, stumbling through narrow paths that appeared as if the land itself was guiding me, or trapping me. Then I heard it. A voice, singular, clear, and far closer than anything else. "You cannot leave. You called us." The ground beneath me trembled. I fell forward onto the soil. Something shifted beneath the earth, a mass moving just below the surface following me. My lantern's light danced, revealing shadows that pulsed like the beat of a heart. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline blinding my pain. The trees bent inward, the wind forming faces, mouths opening, shrieking silently. I ran faster. The dirt beneath me cracked in jagged lines, roots and tendrils snapping up as if to ensnare me. The house loomed behind me. Its windows glowed faintly like watching eyes, following my every move. The door slammed open and shut repeatedly, each thud a reminder that whatever dwelled inside was alive and aware. I reached the main road, gravel crunching under my feet, but the shadows didn't stop. They flowed from the fields, spreading across the road, reaching, clawing, wrapping the edges of my vision with darkness. I screamed, running blindly, the lantern bouncing in my hand. Suddenly the wind shifted. A sharp, piercing gust cleared the shadows from my path, pushing me forward. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispers became screams, but they faded behind me as I sprinted toward the forest edge, toward the town. I didn't stop until the streetlights of Ravenshade glimmered in the distance. Safety, but tenuous, fragile, and fleeting. The house was gone. Or perhaps it was waiting. Watching. Shaping its next move. I collapsed on the roadside, panting, shaking, my lantern guttering in the night. My mind reeled. I had survived. Escaped. Yet every fiber of my being knew the truth. This was not over. Whatever had called me, whatever I had awakened in the soil and shadows, was patient, ancient, immortal, and it knew my name. The whispers returned, now distant, drifting with the wind, reminding me, taunting me. We are here, and we are waiting. And for the first time, I understood the cruel certainty of Ravenshade. You may run, you may escape, but the house and the soil and the darkness will always remember. I returned to Ravenshade the next morning, though I don't know why. Part of me expected the house to be gone, erased by the night, the shadows, or my own terror. But it stood there, silent, unchanging, its windows reflecting the pale morning light. No smoke, no movement, no hint of the horrors from the night before. Just stillness. I thought I had survived. I thought I had escaped. But survival in Ravenshade is never simple. The town looked normal. People walked the streets, unaware of what had occurred. Birds chirped, wind rustled through the trees, and the air smelled like morning dew, mundane, fragile, almost mocking. I tried to convince myself it was over. That the shadows, the whispers, the creatures buried beneath the soil were gone. That I had left them behind. But deep down I knew better. The first sign came when I returned to my cabin. The lantern was gone. Vanished without a trace. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't touched it. Yet somewhere deep beneath Ravenshade, it had been called home. Then the whispers began again. Not loud, not overwhelming, subtle, almost teasing. I heard them in the wind outside, in the rustle of the cornfields, in the groaning of the old trees. You survived, for now. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows crawling beneath the floor, reaching toward me. Every sound became amplified, every breeze suspicious. And when the clock struck midnight, I felt it. The pulse of the soil beneath the cabin, steady, eternal, waiting. Days passed. Weeks. I moved cautiously through Ravenshade, always watching, always listening. And though no figure emerged from the darkness, though no hand grasped me from below, the feeling never left. Something knew me, remembered me, and was patient. Because that is the nature of Ravenshade. It does not forget. It waits. It whispers. And it remembers all those who awaken what should remain buried. I cannot escape it. I cannot destroy it. All I can do is survive, and even survival feels fleeting. Every creak in the floor, every shadow cast by the moon, reminds me that I am part of something older than the town itself. And in those moments when I think I am alone, I hear it. The soil sighs. The shadows stir. And the voice, soft, distant, yet unmistakable, calls my name. We are here, and we are waiting. No matter how far I run, no matter how fast I escape, Ravenshade's darkness lingers. It watches, patient and eternal. And I am trapped in its memory, a witness to the horrors beneath the soil, a part of the promise I foolishly awakened. Some nights, I dream of the house, of the cellar, of the glowing runes, of the faces in the shadows. I wake screaming, but the whispers never leave. They haunt me in silence, in corners, in the faint rustling of the wind. And I know this truth, chilling and absolute. Ravenshade never forgets. The soil never forgives. And the fear never ends.